All right, ready to jump back into this? Not in the zit sense, but ready to jump back into this?
Yeah,
All right, here we go.
yeah. We're jumping into women and plowing them. So, kind of in the sense. So, the four wives rule is not original. So, the Gemara
Hmm.
qualifies in Yevamot 44a 5 that the Gemara qualifies the Mishnah's case. No, it is necessary to teach that he has permission to consummate the Levirate marriage with all of his Yevamots, in the case where it is possible for him to provide for all four women. So this gets into the case that there is a cap for the number of wives you're able to have from Levirate marriage and just in general. The cap for kings is 18, but the cap for normal people is 4. And the reasoning for that is, but if there are any more than that, no, he should not, in order that he will be able to meet the conjugal rights of each woman at least once in each month. Since there's 4 weeks in a month, you can only have up to 4 wives because you can only have intercourse with them for a week during their ovulation cycle, because that's what basically Judaism dictates, is you're not supposed to touch your wife for a week after they're finished their period, which then puts them in ovulation to get them to be the most likely to get pregnant. It just so happens to be that God orchestrated marriage practices and to make people the most likely to get pregnant. Get into a little bit of the scientific knowledge of God things. But that's biblical, and they use that biblical principle of when you are able to have intercourse to show that, hey, the most number of women you can have is 4, and it continues later on that you're only able to have all 4 of them if you are able to support them all financially
Sounds familiar.
and through your intercourse. Sounds very, very familiar. In Surah 4:3, but if you fear that you will not deal fairly with by the orphans, marry the women who seem good to you, 2, 3, or 4, and if you fear that you cannot do justice, then 1, or those who your right hand possesses. In this way, it is more likely that you will not do injustice. Now, this is in contradiction with later on in Surah 4, where it says that you cannot be fair to multiple wives. So there's the whole tension there of, well, it either, if you solve the tension, you're only able to have one wife and endless sex slaves, uh, or there seems to be a contradiction inside the Quran within Surah 4 about the number of women you can marry. But the 4 women and the justification for the 4 women to be able to do justice between them, and it's interpreted often that is mostly through finances and equal shares in the bed. If you're not able to do that, then only have one wife. But if you're able to do that, if you're able to financially support them, you can have up to 4 wives. So this is something that is permitted by the rabbis. Their polygamous practices are nearly identical in much of the ways. So both of these systems are tying in the financial ability and sexual capacity to it, not merely sexual desire. Uh, why? Again, this just shows a lot of the culture. It's not just theology, it's not just eschatology, it's not judgment, it's not just, it seems to be most things. Culture, the way you speak, the way you bless people, because even the blessings that Muslims do come from the Talmud. The way you dress, the way you walk, the way you talk, it all feels very Jewish. The deeper you look into it, the way you pray is Jewish. So this is just another thing within the marriage contracts that is related. You also have possible origins of muta. Now, it is worth noting, there's a caveat here, that it is way more likely he got his muta practices from the Persians, from the Babylonians in general, or from the Arab pagans. It was not very common in the Talmud, and some of these sages who say these type of things are hey, that was not actually something you should have done. But there is this passage here in 37b 5 through 7 that you could make a case for it being very muta sounding. So, therefore, a man should not marry a woman in this country and then go and marry another woman in a different country, lest a son from one marriage and a daughter from another unite with one another, and their child being a abomination before God, because it's incest babies. Is that so? Is there really such a prohibition? Later on, it asks this question. And then it clarifies, since his wife did not accompany him to Dar Dishur, this is one of the rabbis who would practice this, He wished to be married to another woman while he was there in order to avoid a situation that could lead him to having forbidden thoughts. So in order to avoid having intercourse with a woman or a prostitute or whoever, he instead would go and say, which woman will be my wife for the day? It would appear from the fact that both sages married wives in two different places. This is two different guys who said this. They would go into town, they'd be like, hey, who wants to be my wife today? And then they would go in and they would spend the night with that woman. Now it is clarified later on, there is an apologetic for this that says that, the sages are pious men and they're actually just doing this so that they don't feel tempted to have intercourse with women. And there's this common phrase of a man who has bread in his basket doesn't get hungry, where the idea is if a man doesn't have bread, he's gonna want bread. But if he has bread if he has bread accessible to him, he can choose to take the bread or not choose to take the bread. And because he has a choice, he has a stronger will against taking the bread. And they apply this to sex. If the man is married, then it's going to be easier for him not to have intercourse with a random person. So they use the temporary marriages as an apologetic against pleasure marriages, but the way it is originally presented in the Talmud, because that explanation is longer, it's later into this passage in Yevmot. If you're just reading this section of the two sages saying this, and the Gemara accepts that it's fine because it says the Gemara rejects the proof. Sages are different as their names are renowned and therefore their children are always identified by their connection to their father. So it's not a problem that you're marrying women in different countries because even if you get those women pregnant, your kids from the different women are going to be known because you're a celebrity. So if you're a celebrity, you can have temporary pleasure marriages because it doesn't matter if you get the woman pregnant, their kids will not have intercourse together. That's a shallow reading of it, but if that's all that Muhammad had, he could have gotten the idea of pleasure marriages from that. But again, it's more likely got the pleasure marriages from the Persians and from the pagans. But you do get this kind of mutai sounding pleasure marriage with the guys strolling into town and just grabbing one of the women. There's this funny passage right after that that's like, how could this be? Because any woman who was proposed to by the sages would be so excited by the prospect that they would start menstruating uncontrollably, and therefore would be impure to have intercourse with. Which is really silly apologetic. Like, hey, these sages are so well known and so desirable by women that they cause them to menstruate when thinking about marrying them for a day.
That's like rock star back then.
Oh yeah, man. So they do have apologetics against this practice, but there are two different rabbis who would do this. They would just go to places and be like, "Hey, who wants to be my wife?"
Yeah. So
for the caveat, the nuance,
that's what Dawa guys do. You see that? You see
they
that?
go on trips without their wives.
Yeah, the Dawa guys do the same thing. See that? That proves that Islam is stolen from the Talmud.
Yeah. So you got your muta marriages, and then you also got the women or fields to be plowed. Now there is a caveat here with the dating of Perukta Rabbi Eliezer. This might be contemporary, it might be after Muhammad. It's hard to tell. Some of the materials for sure after Muhammad because it talks about the Dome of the Rock. But other parts of it talks about the Christians in a way and the Jews in a way where their practices are still in Jerusalem. So it's written, a lot of its content comes from a time period in which the Jews are in control of Jerusalem. Well, after Islam, they lost control of Jerusalem. So at least its content may predate Islam. So whenever I quote Rabbi Eliezer, there's always going to be a debate between Muslims on the dating of the content. So anytime you see this exact book, it's one of the books that you're like, okay, this could be, it could not be. So we don't know which of these influenced the other. But in Surah 2:223, you get your women are a field for you, so go to your field as you will, and send before you and for your souls and fear Allah, and you'll know that He will meet you, and so on and so on. But your women are a tilth. You can go and tilth your field however you desire. So if the sex position doesn't matter, the time of day doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter if they want to, they kind of have to. as part of the responsibility of being a wife in Islam. And in Perkei Rebbe Eliezer, we have, I will slay Abel my brother, and I will take his twin sister from him, as it is said, and it came to pass when they were in the field. In the field means woman who is compared to a field.
That'd be a good one for like a short video.
Yeah, I've been making short videos. For those who haven't checked out the channel since last time, I've been putting out 5 to 15 minute or 5 to 10 minute videos on different parts of the connections. So far, I've done a lot of stuff on Judgment Day and on the Pillars of Islam.
All right, so
I
you
have another one
guys,
coming out. Those are coming out every Monday and Friday.
yep, that's a good approach. And guys, you have the link to Chris's channel in the description to go check out the shorter videos. You'll want to check those out, learn the material, and share it.
Yes. Now the idea of the go in however you feel is pretty common, especially in Nidorim, which is talking a lot about the marriage relationships, what a husband and a wife do together. So we get in 20b4, rather, whatever a man wishes to do with his wife, he may do. He may engage in sexual intercourse with her in any manner that he wishes, and need not concern himself with these restrictions. As an allegory, it is like meat that comes from the butcher. If he wants to eat it with salt,
Meat
he
in
may
a
eat it that
butcher
way.
store
If he wants
window.
to eat it roasted, he may eat it roasted. If he wants it cooked, it's cooked. If he wants it boiled, it's boiled. Likewise with regard to the fish that came from the fisherman, and it does the same thing over and over. So I just cut it there. But you can do whatever you want with your wife. There's no restriction. And later on in the passage, it says that the Gemara relates a certain woman came before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi to complain about her husband. She and said to him, "My teacher, I set a table using euphemism to say that she lay before him during intimacy, and he turned it over." Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said to her, "My daughter, the Torah permitted him to engage in sexual intercourse with you, even in an atypical manner. What can I do for you if he does so?" So you get that this woman laid on her back, and she's like, "I set him a table. Like there's this bounty before him, and he turns me over, so he can't look at my face or my dangly parts." And the teacher's like, "I mean, he can do whatever he wants." Now there is a debate on whether or not this means anal, or if it means just like
Just a different
doggy.
position. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Doggy stuff.
it's
Yeah.
hard
Matter
to
of fact,
tell.
you see that in the. I mean that's what was interesting as you're reading this, because in the Muslim sources, part of the background of Surah 2 verse 223 is that there were Jews who were saying, if you have sex not in missionary position, then your child's going to be born cross-eyed. The
Right.
Jews were telling the Muslims that.
That comes from the Talmud.
What? Oh, nice.
Yeah. So this is actually the Sunan Abi Dawud 2164. What you were just talking about.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
That's what this one over here. Yeah. So again, we have from in front, from behind, or laying on the back. You can do it however you want, as long as you're doing it in the vagina. Because in Islam, you have a ban on from the butt and from the bleeding orifice, and also from the mouth. So you have these prohibitions, and you have these in the rabbis. They have a lot of different statements. There's statements like the woman has to be on her back and the man has to be in front of him. Then other rabbis debate it. So one of the rabbinic positions within the debate is that exact missionary position that the Hadith mentions. And it also mentions that there are rabbis who take it that if you have intercourse in various ways, you have different things happening to the children. If you do it the wrong way, they can become an epileptic. They can die during pregnancy. The women can die from the process. They can become just sick, generally speaking. They can get diarrhea. So they have all these random things that are happening in it. You also get a list of deformities that the baby will inherit based on the cleanliness of the people whenever they're doing it, the position they're doing it in, and whether or not they bless God before and after, which sounds fairly familiar. But you also get in Bereshit Rabbah a ban on certain types of intercourse. As we just mentioned, Islam bans menstruation and through the anus. Well, in Bereshit Rabbah 18:5, it has a Noahide who has unnatural intercourse with his wife incurs liability for the death penalty. This phrase, unnatural intercourse, is a euphemism for either oral or through the anus. How does one arrive at this? And he shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. In the place that one can produce flesh, child, therefore the vagina. Nida 66a, all of it pretty much bans menstruation. If you read this, it's not really a chapter, they have different words for it. But if you read this section, the entire section is about the laws of menstruation. So just this whole thing is about, I'm not going to quote all of it, so just go read it. And then Yomot 34b 3 through 5, the Gemara responds, and Onan engaged in sexual intercourse in an atypical manner, i.e. anal intercourse. This indicates that he too died the same death for performing the same transgression as his brother. This is in a very long section on what and Onan did in order to have God's wrath upon them and why they died. Some of the rabbinic understanding was they had intercourse through the anus and they spilt their seed inside of that instead of the vagina. Some of them were like they were doing oral. And again, in that section in Genesis, it says explicitly he was killed for spilling his seed on the ground. So most of the rabbis were like, oh, if you do anything that doesn't result in the seed going into the right hole, you are going to be cursed, you're going to die, it's prohibition. So you do get in some places that you can do whatever you want, and you might even be able to say like, oh, this rabbi here approved of his husband or the husband doing it to the wife. We have other places where they seem to be countering it, that they're against any form of sodomy or oral intercourse or any other forms of intimacy that doesn't end up with the sperm inside of the right hole. That exact ban we see mirrored in the prophetic voice of Muhammad. And he's not really a prophet, but he says the same thing in Sunan Abi Dawud 3904. So we have bans on certain types of intercourse, which is interesting, and we also have acceptance in being able to do anything you want sexually outside of those. Now, you can also make a case, a bad case, that they allow wife beating. I don't actually have the passages on screen because I don't want people to use it out of context. So there are passages that talk about how there's a certain class of people, the people of essentially like perdition, but it's the people of the land is the name for it. I'm just not going to say it because, again, I don't want people Googling this to be able to find it because and use it against the Jews unfairly. Over and over and over, I'm going to bring up a lot of places, they explicitly say beating your wife is evil. But there is a place where you can get that beating a bad woman, a woman who is rebellious, is acceptable. They have punishments, varying levels of punishments of a rebellious wife. And most of it is financial punishments. You have that their dowry is decreased every week for 7 weeks until they have nothing, and then you can divorce them. And you also have certain times where it is like mandatory divorces to a rebellious wife. So you don't have the SOR 434 with the verbal abuse, the not having intercourse and beating them. That exact formula seems to be Islamic in origin, not rabbinic. So there is this one of these passages of this is original to Muhammad, or it was inspired by the pagan practices that he was living in. But it's not coming from the Jews, largely speaking. There is a phrase here that an ignoramus strikes his wife. So like if you marry your daughter to an ignoramus, one who doesn't study the Torah, so if you don't study the Torah, the rabbis had such a bad opinion of you that I actually included this passage down here, which is quite intense. But if you are selling your wife, if you're marrying your wife off to a person who refuses to study Torah, then it is as if you gave them to a lion. Why? Because the lion mauls its prey and eats and has no shame. So too, an ignoramus strikes his wife and then engages in sexual relations with her without appeasing her first and has no shame. So this is actually a condemnation on some of the practices that Muhammad allowed and practiced. So to say that the wife beating came from it.
There is a parallel in the hadith with that one, where Muhammad said that if you beat your wife like you beat your slave, then you shouldn't approach her for sex right afterwards. Um, but that's
Interesting.
yeah, it seems to be a distinction between how you'd beat a wife and beat a slave. Um, like
Mm,
the wife you're not supposed to beat too severely, even though we've got hadith where a woman is beaten until her skin turned green. But
right.
apparently you
Yeah.
could beat the slave worse, and you shouldn't beat your if you beat your wife like you beat your slave, then you shouldn't approach her for sex afterwards.
Right. There's lots of things about admonishing your wife and how you can do discipline because the husband is in charge of the wife in the Talmudic material. But again, a lot of it is related to, and I'll read some of the beautiful passages on marriage in a second because I deliberately wanted to bring some of them up because I knew the gropers and other people might use this as an unfair attack against the Talmud and against Jews. And I want to be at least respectful to the point of there's a lot of material in the Talmud I think is apparent and evil. There's a lot of it that is benign and good, or benign or good, but you can take it out of context and make it evil. I want to have the Talmud be saying what it's actually saying and not using it outside of uh, what you should be using it for. So, this is one of the statements on an ignoramus. So later on in this passage, or I guess right before this passage, in Pesachim 49b4, Rabbi Elazar said it is permitted to stab an ignoramus, one who doesn't study the Torah, to death on Yom Kippur that occurs on Shabbat. His students said to him, Master, at least say that it is permitted to slaughter him. He said to them, I intentionally use the word stab, as this term slaughtering requires a blessing when one slaughters an animal, and that term stabbing does not require a blessing in any context. So
Nice.
this gets into the halal practices of animal slaughtering, where you profess God's name over it, you profess a blessing over it. The Jews did that too. But you get the rabbis really, really, really hate the ones who are not willing to study Torah. And they even say that anyone who doesn't study Torah is going to be in hell forever. So, uh, pretty intense language. Uh, not all the rabbis are saying this, rather. This is just this dude's crashing out over the topic. So again, this is not representative of all of the Talmud. This is just representative of this guy. Which, whenever you're reading the Talmud, you have to remember that it's a debate. It's a book of debates. So not all of it is. There's not really blanket acceptance of most things in the Talmud. But I do want to point out that there are lots of beautiful passages about love and respect and honor within a marriage in the Jewish sources. A man should not project excessive fear in his household. And part of the reason for this is because his wife is responsible for keeping his household together. Rabbi Heblo said a person must always be careful about sustaining the honor of his wife, as blessing is found in a person's house only because of his wife, as is stated in allusion to this, and he dealt well with Abraham for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen. Speaking of Sarah, any man who does not have a wife is left without joy, without blessing, without goodness. And Rambam, Maimonides, said in Mishnah Torah, his famous work, thus commanded the sages, a man should honor his wife more than his own body and love her like his own body. Now that sounds very
Yep.
biblical with
Mm-hmm.
Paul, but this is the rabbinic position, largely speaking. They don't hate women. They love women. They honor them. They respect them. Now, women are still second-class citizens in a lot of ways, but it's not the same. I don't want to show that like it's the same as Islam because Islam is markedly worse. You do also have the stoning for adultery and the witnesses requirements. So Rabbi Yossi says a defendant is never executed unless the mouths of two witnesses are those who warn him, as it is stated at the mouth of two witnesses or at the mouth of three witnesses shall he be put to death. So this gets into a lot of things, but specifically adultery. And you need two witnesses. This seems to be an apologetic within the Quran where he's actually upping the number to four. In the Talmud, there's a discussion of if it was up to the rabbis, there would not be any executions within 80 years, or like there should be like one execution per 80 years, and that would be a violent court. So their standard of evidence is actually unusually high, and they slowly did away the practice of stoning to death because their burden of proof was so high it was just impossible to get. Well, Islam seems to have adopted that jurisprudence and even doubled it to have the witnesses to be 4 instead of 2. But that does it, and you remember the hadith about like what does the Torah say, and they bring forward the Torah and it says that okay, these are the witnesses. It says okay, that's what we're going to do. It seems to be that the 2 witnesses is also used in Surah 2. So in some places it seems to be elevating the witnesses to 4, other places it seems to be keeping it at 2, but it does have the same legal precedent of the number of witnesses and the type of witnesses and the witnesses and what they can do and say. Because in the Talmud, it also has witnesses can't be related, or if they are related, another witness needs to be in the mix as well. So it can't be 2 brothers witnessing to something. It has to be 2 brothers plus another person. So a lot of the jurisprudence around witnesses and stoning and the punishments are pretty identical, which gets back into all of the jurisprudence of Islam being pretty much the same.